Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechtas Zevachim daf Yud Beis. We're going to begin on Yud Aleph Amud Beis by the Mishnah. Says the Masnisin. With regard to the Karban Pesach, HaPesach sheshachtu shachris v'arba'asr shul shema. So we mentioned something very fascinating when it comes to the Karban Pesach. Obviously, it's supposed to be brought at its proper time, which is after Chatzos, on the 14th of Nisan. And, of course, if you do it l'shma, then it's kosher. If it's shlo l'shma, it's pasul. But what's interesting is that, let's say, and we've used this example, let's say in November, right? A totally different time. You take a Karban Pesach, and if in November you say, this is going to be shechted for a Karban Pesach, l'shmo, it's pasul. But if in November, you take a Karban Pesach and say, this is for a shlamim, it's kosher because all year round it's a shlamim. The question that the Mishnah here deals with is, what if it is the 14th, but it's still not the right time because it's not in the afternoon, it's the morning. So in that situation, if you would take a Karban Pesach and let's say have a different intention, let's say for it to be an Ola, for example, Rabbi Yeshua Machsher. Rabbi Yeshua says it's kosher, like we've said before, because Ke'ilu Nishcha b'Shlosh Asar. It's the same thing as shechting on the 13th or in November. Then, therefore, the din is, if you take a Karban Pesach and you shecht it l'shem a different carbon, then it's kosher. However, interestingly enough, it's a machlokas, as the Mishnah cites, and says that again, it's ki'ilu like ushachna on the 13th. However, ben b'seir paisel. Why? And this is a difficult word. We have to understand what it means. Ki'ilu nishchat ben harbayim. It's as though it was shechted in the afternoon. I mean, it wasn't. So, it wasn't bismanli. So the Gemara is going to try to understand exactly how this all plays out. So, and that's the Gemara. Rashi says, "Gemara mafarshla." Fine. And then we have the following: Amr Shimon ben Azai, Mekublani mipishim shnayim zakin, that it was in the name of 72 elders, and it doesn't mention the names of the elders. We'll see why. B'yom shashivu es Rabbi Eliezer b'yeshiva, the day in which the great Rabbi Eliezer was appointed as the leader. Shekol hazvachim hanechom shenizbechu shul shemon ksherin. That, as we saw on the Mishnah Daf Beis, that when it comes to every carbon that is shechted shlo shema, it's actually going to be kosher. However, el shul ol balim mishum chayva, as the Mishnah said, that doesn't mean that you can't, you're not supposed to, or that you don't have to bring another carbon. You still have to, but it's kosher that you can continue to bring this carbon, even though you shechted it shlo shema. Chutz min haPesach min hachatos. And that was the original opinion, even though there was three opinions in our Mishnah on Daf Beis. We have this opinion that's only by the Karban Pesach, that Shlo L'Shema would be pasul, as well as, of course, the Karban Chatas, which we've discussed. Now, the Mishnah mentioned a couple other opinions. Maybe it's referring to an Asham, because it's comparable to a Chatas, Chatas, Ka'asham, okay. Or that it depends if it's going up in Kedusha or lower in Kedusha, from a Kedashim Kalam to Kachi Kedashim. But here, interestingly enough, they mention an Oyla. It says Rashi, El Oyla, that it's only by an Oyla. So we'll have to understand what that's referring to. Okay. So it says the Gemara. So Omer Rabbi Lazar, Omer Rabbi Oishia, Makshir Hayir ben Beseira. Now, Ben Beseira, who we already quoted, passes a carbon that was brought in the morning, Shalol Shema, on the 14th. Now, he will be Maksha B'Pesach Shachtu Shachas B'Arba Aser L'Shmoi. Why? Dekua Yoima Zimanehu. Now, our Mishnah is only talking about it was Shalol Shema. But what happens in a situation that it was actually brought... You brought a Karban Pesach on the 14th of Nisan, which is the right date, and it was Lishma for Karban Pesach, but it was in the morning, but it was Lishma, not like our Mishnah, it was Lishma. So he would say it is actually kosher. For the same logic, as to why Shlo Shmo would be puzzle, is because apparently you have the entire day to be able to bring the Karban Pesach, which is an interesting concept because we've always thought that the Karban Pesach has to be brought only after Chatzos. Umay Ki'ilu, so what does it mean it's Ki'ilu? So I did the Rabbi Yeshua Ki'ilu, Amar Ihu Nami Ki'ilu, but it's really not. It's as though, because it's fine. That's brought on the 14th, and it's okay. So Yehachi the Miflegi b'Shlo Shema Liflu Shema. Why does the Mishnah mention a machlokas between these two opinions about if it was shechted in the morning Shlo Lishma? So why don't we just talk about it's a Karban Pesach and it was shechted properly Lishma, which is what most people do, but it's just at the wrong time, and there would be a machlokas there as well. No, if then Havamina of Shlo Shema Maidu Rabbi Yeshua ben Beseira. You would think that maybe he would agree when it comes to having a Shlo Shema thought. Hayo Miksasa Roy. So you would think that maybe Rabbi Yeshua actually would agree to the opinion of Beba Beseira, and he would actually hold it would be puzzle with Iver HaKoil. Kamash Moah, and that's why we have to show then there's a machlokas there too. And that's basically, if our Mishnah said Lishma, then you would think the case of Shol Shema is not a machlokas, everything everyone will hold is puzzle. Okay, now how do we understand this? Again, the Vaksiv ben Harbayim. The pasuk says beferish that it's only in the afternoon you're supposed to bring a Karban Pesach, not in the morning. So Omer Ula Berei Derav Eloi ben Shnei Arbayim. So it's an interesting language. Ben Arbayim we usually translate as afternoon, but it really means between the two eves. So therefore, it could be between one sun movement and the other sun movement, which is sunrise to sunset. So maybe that's what it means. Okay, so again, Rashi points out, so we're saying, and Rashi points out, it means Alois HaShachar Shkiyasachama Dahainu Bein Soif Erev De Esmoil, which is between yesterday's eve with Chilos Erev De Urta, in the beginning of the eve of tonight. Okay. Anyway, so that's also like in between. So basically, you can read the pasuk in the morning. So Tamid. We know that when it comes to the Tamid, there's a Tamid Shel Shachar, which is in the morning, and there's another carbon called the Tamid Shel Ben Harbayim. Now, no one says that the Tamid Shel Ben Harbayim, because it has Ben Harbayim, means you can do that in the morning, because the other one says Tamid Shel Shachar. So Hasam, since it already mentions the first one is in the morning, so therefore, Mechlal de Ben Harbayim Mamish. In that case, it has to be talking about the afternoon. But since we don't have the word boker contrasting it in the psukim, here maybe actually means the morning as well. So Ema Chad B'Boker, maybe one's in the morning, and Idach Kul Yaima. And the other one you have the whole day. So Echad B'Boker, V'loy Shnayim B'Boker. Now it says B'Boker, so Echad B'Boker, one is in the morning, and not two, right? You can't say that. Says Rashi, Hilkach al Korach Sarach L'Hasha Sasheni Ad Erev. You have no choice. You have to wait until the evening to be able to, the afternoon rather, to be able to bring the second Talmud. But that doesn't mean when it comes to the Karban Pesach that maybe the Karban Pesach Taki you have the whole day, and therefore that's the reason why if it was shechted Shlo L'Shma, then it would be possible because it was supposed to have been shechted. That's considered zman. Okay, so that's the answer. So nerois, when it comes to the candles, the ben harbayim hachanam dekoli yom kosher. Again, does that mean you have the whole day? So on this shani hasim dechsim erev viad boiker. Over there it says from eve to morning. So obviously it doesn't mean you have the whole day before it. But Tanya Erevad Boiker, Tainlo Midasa, Shade Delechas Halachas Erevad Boiker. It just means that you have to put in the menorah, as Rashi says, a half lug for each candle or each container for the to be able to hold oil. So that's the Chachamim's takana from the evening of Tekufas Teves, which it gets dark pretty early, that it should be able to continue to burn the entire evening. But Tammuz of a Nisan, in Tammuz and Nisan, with Tishrei, im tidlak shlish hayoim u'ifchaslan. You could put in less. It's just telling us the winter solstice, the time where it's the longest nighttime. You make sure that has to have a lot of extra oil in it. Okay, that should burn. Davar acher, ein locha avodah ksheira me'ervad boiker elzu bilvad. Only this is kosher from all the avodas, such as Rashi says, the avodah of the sprinkling of the blood, or the kamitza, the katiris, shekasherin mahadlakas neris ve'elach shezu macheres hakulan. This one is like the longest. Elazu bovad katiris t'chsib ba ben horbayim hachanami dekul yayim kosher. So you tell me by the katiris you have also the whole day. The shani katiris. So it's different when it comes to the katiris as we continue to Yud Beis Amud Aleph. The iskish leneris, because we make a hekish to the candles, and as the pasuk Rashi quotes, v'halois aharoin v'hainu ben horabayim the katiris. So hasim nami ksiv. Also, it's written, and we'll see the whole pasuk in Devarim. Ki email hamakam asher yivchar Hashem lechecha shachar shemol only in that place which is designated. Tizbach as a Pesach ba'erev. You shech the carbon Pesach in the eve. Kivo hashemesh toward the eve. Moed seitzchem Mitzrayim, the time in which we left Egypt. Now sham tizbach as a Pesach ba'erev. Now it says pretty clearly. Apparently it should be done toward the evening, which is not in the morning. So it's just coming telling you that sometimes it should come after. It should come after the Tamid. Says Rashi, Uchor Pesach l'Tamid. Technically, maybe you do have the whole day, as we're saying, to bring the carbon Pesach, even in the morning. But if you delayed ad zman shchitas Tamid kodem lo, because we do the tader kodem. So even though the zman of already kicked in before, because according to this opinion, you can bring the carbon Pesach even early in the morning. But if, let's say, you didn't, then all of a sudden now it's the afternoon. So then, okay, we have to stop because it's now time for the Talmud Shobir Rabbayim. That's all it's coming to tell you. Uichud davar hu da'asa, the sanya. Yi'achar davar, if you delayed the matter, shenemar boy be'erev hu ben Rabbayim, l'daber shloi nemar boy el ben Rabbayim bovad. So you have something that says erev and hu ben Rabbayim, and then when it comes to the Talmud, it only says Ben Horabayim. So since it only says Barabayim, it's more exact, and therefore that's the reason why you do that first. I don't know why we don't just say Tadir, but okay, that's the reason. It doesn't make sense. So you ever find something in the morning, that's the proper time. Once the afternoon kicks in, then now you have to tell me it has to be done after the Talmud. It could have been done before. If you could do it before, then you should still be able to do it before, right? So it's still possible. After all, the Emor Rav Yochanan, as we find in Tfilas HaShachar, halachim mispal shel shachar halachim mispal shel mincha halachim mispal shel musafin. That when it comes to davening musaf you have the whole day, right? The Mishnah in Tfilas HaShachar says Tfilas musafin is kol hayoyim, so you can daven musaf like we typically do on a regular Shabbos at 10 in the morning, or whatever it is. Which is not the Zman of Mincha. But if, let's say, for whatever reason, you didn't daven Mincha, didn't daven Musaf in the morning, and all of a sudden it's Zman Mincha, so you daven Mincha first, then Musaf. Again, but it's because of the reason, that's the reason, is because of Tadir. Okay. And why doesn't it just give that answer of Tadir? Okay. Uben Harabayim Dechsiv Gabi Kataris and Eres Lamli. So, what is the purpose of Ben Harabayim by these other psukim? And furthermore, Let's look at Rashi. Hoyel umina loy havi mashma lon ben arbai mamish doesn't mean literally the afternoon. Meboilin krachrina lefrushe. And furthermore, there's a Tosefta which seems to contradict this whole business. Heishiv Rabbi Tachas ben Betera, whatever Rabbi Yeshua loy imamar tibishoy shasu said, listen, it can't be, because when it comes to the 13th, which is not Erev Pesach, like the day before that, like way off, she'ein miksaso yeruya. There's no part of the 13th prepared or proper to be able to bring the carbon. There's never a day so the 13th is definitely a problem. However, on the 14th, you can't compare it to the 13th, because the 14th, at least some of the day it can be brought. Now it's interesting language. The language shouldn't be that on the 14th you can bring it on part of the day, which seemingly means only after the chatzos in the afternoon. That's what you should say, you have the whole day. So it's mashma clearly that you cannot bring the carbon Pesach anytime you want in the morning of Erev Pesach. Ella Im Rav Yochanan Poisel Hay ben Mesera but Pesach Sheshach Bar Ba'aser Shachars. The truth is, no. He would hold that this carbon Pesach is, even though it was done ben Lishmoi, even though it was done Lishma, but it was done in the morning of the 14th, that's not the Zman. Actually, that's what we're saying. It's not the Zman. So then, how about if it was on the 14th in the morning, a carbon Pesach, but it was Shlol Shma? Shouldn't that be just like a carbon in November, which we've already said is kosher? But he holds that it will not be kosher ben Shlol Shma. Even if it was Shlol Shma, but since it was on the 14th in the morning, Shlol Shma will not work, which is obviously quite a chiddush. Hoyel miksaso roy. So therefore, he will passel Shlol Shma only on the 14th, because the 14th is unusual in that it's only partially not allowed to be brought on that day. But of course, on the 14th after Chatzos, that's the proper time. So therefore, because on that same day, there's already the proper time to bring it. So in the morning, even though Lishmo is possible, but Shlol Lishmo also be possible. Okay, so after this interesting answer, so Megadev Ba Rabbi Avoy, he kind of wasn't accepting too much of this approach. He said, understand, Im Kain Pesach Kosher Leben Beseira Hechem Shkachasla. Where do we find a carbon Pesach that is kosher? When did you separate this carbon? Did you separate the carbon, designating it for a carbon Pesach on the 14th? So dichui mikarhu, that is considered to be a dichui right away. Why? Says Rashi, the b'shas hafrasha hulchasel midi, because when you were mafresh it as a carbon, you said that this is going to be a carbon, you can't bring it for anything. It can't be brought as a carbon Pesach, and it cannot be brought, even if it was brought as a carbon Pesach, you designate it as a carbon Pesach, you can't bring it, you can't actually shecht it as a carbon Pesach because it's too early. And since it's still the 14th, it doesn't work at all. So that can't be when you did it. The Eid Afrashim Esmol, if you did it on the 13th, then in that case, Nira V'nidchahu. Originally, it was Nira. On the 13th, you could have been mafresh it, because if it was done Shlol Shma on the 13th, it would work as a Shlomim. But then it becomes Nidcha right away in the morning. So how does this work? And Rashi points out something important. He says, Bishlamul Rabbanan Pesachenu Nidcha Klal. According to the Rabbanan, the Pesach is not Nidcha. O Milishmoy, O Shlo. The Ad Zman Shchitaso Chazil Shlomim, Uvizmanu Chazil Pesach. Right? So according to the Rabbanan, it's always fit. It's either right before Chatzos, it's a Shlomim, if it was Shlol Lishma. And after Chatzos, it's fit if you did it Lishma as a Pesach. But according to him, in the morning is no man's land. and therefore that will cause problems, according to him. Rabbi Avo tihal acher chatzos. You're right. It has to be then, according to you, that this animal, according to Ben Becerra, you could only have been mafresh it after chatzos, and which is the zman shchita, and therefore it's fit to be brought lishma as a Karban Pesach. The truth is, you could have even designated it in the morning. Isn't it a nidcha? In mechusar zman lo bo b'yoyim. We don't say this problem of it being nidcha because it did get separated. You were mafresh it boy b'yoyim. And therefore, we say in mechusar zman lo bo b'yoyim. It's not considered to be mechusar zman because it was designated, even though now you can't bring it, not as a Pesach and not shlosh shmaz shlomim, but it's not mechusar zman. It's not considered to be mechusar zman because it's on the same day. So it still works. You could even have designated the night before Laila in mechusar zman because the night also is not mechusar zman. The Tani de Rabbi Shmuel, when Leil Shmini, the 8th night, Nichnas Ladir Lehis Aser. So what is this referring to? This is referring to Meiser Behemo. Says Rashi that the Kaimulon B'Bachar Perik Meiser Behemo Mechusar Zman Einu Nichnas Ladir Lehis Aser. When something is mechusar zman, which is a problem because it's not the right time, you're not allowed to do meiser behem on it. Now, an animal which is less than 8 days old, you can't bring as a carbon, right? You're not allowed to. Now, what if we're dealing, it's the 8th night. So on the 8th night, it could already been brought, even though the truth is it's still not a carbon yet until the 8th day. It's not shaykh to be brought as a carbon to the 8th day. Therefore, that's the reason why, even though the animal may not yet have reached its 8th day, so to speak, nonetheless, also you can't bring it until the day. You can only be makar for carbon in the day. So the fact that you put it as part of the Meiser Behema calculation, that works because in Laila, in mechusar zman, Laila is in mechusar zman. Ukurebi af Turiki. The Rabbi after Riki Harami, he has the contradiction in Psukim. Ksiv, on one hand, the pasuk says, V'haya shiva shamim tachas imoy, that for 7 days it should be by the mother, which means you can't be makar of it the first 7 days. Holayla, but then night apparently is chazi. It's only the 7 days, but then that night's okay. You have to wait actually till the 8th day. It says the 8th day, which is mashma hol laila chazi. That night before is not good. So haketza. So the answer is like this: laila l'kedusha, v'yoyim l'hisratza. You could already that night already designate it, right? Even though it's not shaykh to be brought until the 8th day. But therefore, it's the 8th when it's mitzratza. But nonetheless, it's still fit to be makdashit, even though it's not chazi at night for hakrava. Again, we see from here that Laila is ein mechusar zman. Okay. Let's look at question. Let's first of all look at, question 6b. The Eza carbon sfirli benaze shepasul shul shma, and that we said in the Mishnah was an oila. Okay. Question 7. So for 7 days, the animal's supposed to be by the mom. Mishmini, only on the 8th day, it's okay. Now, the first pasuk says mashma the night of the 8th is kosher. The other one says no. So haketzad. So laila l'kedusha, yoyim l'hiratzeh. And therefore, that again shows you that Laila is ein mechusar zman. Do you want to actually, according to him, say that according to him that Bali Chaim, living animals, are nidcha? Says Rashi. The fact that we're not having to say, oh no, you were mafresh it after chatzos. So Dilma ein dichoy ela b'shchutin. Maybe you would say taka that the only time it's an issue is once the carbon is shechted. It could go in meis hamishtaleyach, hishavech adam, like the Gemara in Yomi says, that you have these two goats, the mishtaleach dies, so you have to spill the blood, because at that point it's already nidcha. But maybe this animal is alive. You haven't shechted it yet in the morning. You just designated it. So it sounds like the fact that you have to be mafresh it only after chatzos. Why can't you do it in the morning? After all, don't we hold that ein bali chaim nidchen? Similarly, no, it's true. You're right. Bali chaim are nidchen. Rabbi Yochanan behemishal shnei shutvin. You have an animal that belongs to two partners. Hikdish chetzia can be makdish half of it to one of them. The chazer, and then go back v'loka chetzia, and you can purchase the other half. Vikdisha, kedusha. So vikdisha, and your makdish the second half. So kedusha, it's whole, it's kodesh. Then kariva, but you can't be makriv it. Why? Since at the time that you originally were makdish the first half, the other one was not. The whole thing was not kodesh. It was not fit to be makriv, because you can't. Half of it was hektish and half of it was chulin. So therefore, we see from here that it can no longer. You can no longer be makriv. It says Rashi hilkach enu kariva oid the tirev leichin b'domei acheres. You have to go and let it graze, and then with its value, after you sell it, you can get another animal. So why is this? Well, it's a raya because it's nidchi, even machayim. The yoisa timura, you can do a timurasa kiyotzeba, and the timura is like it. Even though we said there's a chiluk when it comes to din of timura, when it comes to a shutta for partner. Okay. Shema mina tlos. We see here actually three things. First of all, Shema mina bali chaim nidchen, as we just proved that bali chaim are nidche, and therefore since you only makish half, the other half is chulin. It's a problem. Shema mina dichem ikar havi dichui. We also see that a dichui from the onset is a dichui. The Shema mina, as we continue Yud Beis Mud Beis, yesh dichui b'domim. There's dichui b'domim. So Rashi yesh teres dichui b'kedushas domim. It's not only when we're dealing with kedushas aguf, even if all we're dealing with the kedushas domim, mafabi she'enu kedushas aguf. So that is an added chiddush, even though it hasn't reached this higher level of kedushas aguf, we still say yish dichui by that. Question TA22. Behema shel Shnei Shutvin, Hikdish Chatzi v'Chazer v'Loka Chatza v'Ekdisha Kedusha v'In Kariva Shema Mina Tlos. Eu Tlos Shema Mina. So first again is Bali Chaim Nidchen, Dichem Ikar Havi Dichui, and Yish Dichui B'Damim. Okay, which is maybe question TB24. Let's see. The Liba would have been Beseira, the Pesach Sheshachtim Yadal Shachar Shlosh Shema Puzzle, Mikomakam Liba the Chad Mandimer Eshel Haktish Pesach B'Shachris, Venu Nisel Mishim Dichui, Elu Gimel Talmim Yeshel Haksher, Shaloye Hebezem Mishim Dichui. It's a hard question. I wrote in Dichui Labali Chaim, which is a good answer. In Dichui Bedomim, which is a good answer. And I wrote in Dichui B'Mitzvos. Maybe the other answer is Dichui Miyakara Lo Havi Dichui. That's a really difficult question because it's asking you to flip everything on its head. I think that's what's being asked over here, but it's a similar question as we just heard. It's just on the opposite way. Okay, that's TB24. Mark this down here. Okay. All right. Let's keep going. All right, so the Gemara continues like this. Oimer ulo oimer Rabbi Yochanan. Achel chaylev. A person eats non-kosher fats, which there's typically a chiyuv b'shoiging of bringing a carbon. The hifrish carbon. You're makriv and you're mafresh rather carbon for a chatas, and therefore everything's fine. You could be bringing it, but here's a problem. Himer das the chazabo. You became a renegade, and you went off the derech. Let's say it that way. So because of that, it's a problem because the pasuk tells us that someone who is a mummer, it's mi'am ha'aretz, prat l'mummer. A mummer is not allowed to bring a carbon. Now, he did tshuva, but it doesn't matter. There's a very fascinating thing. Like, even though when it comes to tshuva, your averos are removed, but the mitzvah still remains, right? The reality is that it's you did something, right? That you can't change the mitzvah, and therefore, since it was not fit to be brought as a carbon, that's it. It's kind of like a person who does is boilacious ish and she has a kid, and you do tshuva and to tshuva gemor. The reality is that kid's still in this world, right? The sin still is in front of you. I don't know if that's exactly the same, but possibly. Itmar nami oimer Rabbi Yomi oimer Rabbi Avo oimer Rabbi Yochanan achal chalev. Let's say a person ate fat, v'hifresh carbon, and the person was mafresh a carbon, which again is everything that we said is acceptable, and that's what you're supposed to do. So what happened? V'nishtata, person became a shaita. Person's a shaita, can't bring a carbon. And then v'chayzev v'nishtatva. Luckily, he got healed. So again, that's it. It's pushed off. We need both of these cases, or more of these cases. The case of the shaita, the person of the mummer. Diashmi inan kamaisa mishum dahavi dichoi dochi nashi biadayim. Here, he did this biadayim, right? He basically made, I guess we're going to talk about the mummer. You're the one that caused these problems. You didn't want to become a shaita. That happened. So maybe it's kiyoshin dami. It's just like a person goes to sleep. Obviously, you can't go bring a carbon when you're sleeping, but that doesn't affect when you wake up in the morning. So maybe the same thing with a shaita. At that moment that you're a shaita, you don't have the capacity to not be a shaita. So therefore, maybe that's more significant. So question 8. Das or nishtata, you're a shaita. So he says, Madu itzra chashmin and batarti. Okay. So again, shaita could be like you're sleeping, wasn't in your control. But on the other hand, because you have no control, you don't have control of your future to be able to change it. Even though it happened, who says that it's going to be fixed so fast? You can always do tshuva immediately. So maybe that's different. So boy Rav Yirmiyah, achel chel v'hifresh carbon. So again, everything is done properly. And the v'hara Beis shechel mutter. And all of a sudden, Beis Din says, by the way, this is back in Masechtas Horius, the guy said, Beis Din says, that it's mutter, in which if the majority of the people would have followed the psak of the Beis Din, then there'd be a chiyuv of par helam davar shel tzibor, is a machlokus in Masechtas Horius in the Mishnah over there. But let's just keep it simple. The Beis Din would have to bring a par. However, chaz behen, then so then, because let's say a lot of people did it, so then there's no chiyuv of having to bring a kisva or a seira with this carbon yachid. Rather, it would be the par. But then all of a sudden the Beis Din retracts and says, "Oh, I'm wrong. We're wrong. Chiyuv is not mutter." So mahu mi havi dichoi lo havi dichoi. How does that work? Is this considered to be a dich or not? Says Rashi. So nidchalo de'ilu ovar hashta, because you would violate the sin now. La bar carbon who you wouldn't be shaykh to bring the carbon. Why? Because it says yachid shas b'haris Beis Din pot, even though it's a machlokus. But if one person listened to the Beis Din, so then not that the majority. So if the majority, then there's a par. But if it's a yachid, what does he do? Does he have to do anything? Maybe not, if you listen to the Beis Din. So therefore, because of that, At that moment, he became putter from bringing a carbon, and then only afterwards they retracted. So now he's chayiv again to bring a carbon. So how does that work? So Amrule Hahu Saba Ki Pasach Rabbi Yochanan B'Dichuyin, when he began talking about these different ideas of things being pushed off, Meha Pasach. He said, from this it is rejected. So my timer, because Hasam over there by the Mummer, the Shaita, Gavra Idchi, Carbonal Idchi. There was no problem with the carbon, it was just a problem of the person. He didn't do tshuva, that he was a Mummer, or he became a Shaita. But the carbon was fine. But over here, Hacha Carbon Nami Idchi. Not only is it an issue with the person, but also the carbon itself becomes problematic, that this carbon shouldn't be able to be brought. Because, again, if we hold this din, which is actually machlokas, Yachad Shasa Bahar is based in his potter, so then the whole carbon is off. Amr Shmuel ben Azai mekubulani mepi shivim v'shnaim zakin b'chul, so lamle misna shivim v'shnaim zakin, d'kul b'chadash shitasa havi kaima. So, like, why does he mention this? I mean, basically they all are saying the same thing, because it says shivim v'shnaim zakin, it should say Zakanim. So it basically means they were all in the same yeshiva, and they were all basically like one person. So he only added when it came to Shlol Shema that it would passel by an oil. So Amram Huno, my time of the Benazai, oil hu Yishirech Nichayach Hashem. It says who, which is specifically as an oil. He was Shema Kshera, Shlol Shema Psula. It's only kosher with Shema, but not Shol Shema. 1 second. Hashem Nami Ksibei Hu. Hu Leachar HaKatar Simurim Hu Diksiv. That's only written, as we mentioned this numerous times, by the bringing of the sacrificial parts. The Hai Nami Leachar HaKatar Simurim Hu Diksiv. So that's the question. Because that's not a question, because during the sacrificial parts are not ma'akev. So certainly that can't be telling to tell you an ikuv that if it was Shlol Shema. So 1 second, you can say the same thing when it comes to an oil. This pasuk of oilahu Yishirech Nechayach Hashem is after the Haktaris Emorim. So trei hu. There's actually two. Gabi Osham Nami trei hu ksivi. There's also two there. So what's the difference? Ella benazai mekavachaymer meisilah. He learns that from mekavachaymer. What's that? Machatas. Now, chatas, we've already said, shol shmos posel. Now, chatas shenu kolil, and we know chatas is not completely burnt. Shachta shol shmos psul. So, oil she kolil lo kol shekain. So, certainly, an oila is more chomer. So, therefore, if you mess up, then it should certainly be posel. Now, mal chatas shechein mechaperes. But maybe the din by carbon, the reason why chatas is problematic is because it's mechaper, so we need it to be perfect for it to be mechaper. Shlol Shema, it's not going to work. So Pesach Yuchiach, a carbon Pesach is not for kapara. That's not the purpose of eating a carbon Pesach. Yet, if it's Shlol Shema, it's possible. So maybe also when it comes to the oil, the Abamal Pesach Shchen Zman Kavua. When it comes to carbon Pesach, maybe the reason why is because it's a very set time, and since it's a set time, it has to be done with Shema. Shlol Shema won't work. The Bechatas Tochiach. A chatas isn't on a particular set time, and nonetheless it also shol shema. And now we have a sada shava. The chazar din lorizeh krizeh vorizeh krizeh, that the attributes of a chatas are not the same as a pesach. Chatas has a strong attribute because it's mechaper. Pesach has a strong attribute that it has to be bismanai. However, those reasons don't cause. Obviously, those are not the reasons for something Shlol Shema to be possible by them, because each of them are lacking each of those attributes. So, Hasana Shavash Behen, but what they do have in common, Achatas and Pesach, Shein Kachim, they're considered to be their karbanos, have a Shachta Shlol Shema and Pasul. So, if any of you oil she Kachim, the Shachta Shlol Shema is Psul. So, 1 second, Mal Sada Shavash Behen, but still not a good Sada Shava, because Chatas and Pesach have something that oila doesn't. Sheish mehem sad kares. They both have a sad kares, as this we've said before. Because first of all, we know carbon pesach is a din kares if you don't eat if you don't bring carbon pesach. And the reason why you bring a chatas is because b'mezid, if you would have done that same sit, would have been kares. So Ben Azai says as we continue, Yud Gimel Aleph, sad kares lo parich. He doesn't like that, says Rashi. It's not the same. The chantas enu oynish kares. The reason why you're bringing a chantas is not because of kares, right? Al havaso ella she'al shkogas kares uba. It's only, again, if you would have done it b'mezid, but that's not why you're bringing a chantas. You're doing it because you did it b'shogeg. And if you do something b'shogeg, you're not chayv kares, so it's not true. Upesach oynish kares al havasoi. Okay, so asham nami lacy. So if that's the case, why are we stopping at an oil? Why don't we say other things like a carbon asham? So asham parich, you could ask, there could be a problem on the sada shava with an asham, not by an oil. What is that? Mal sada shava shebehen, when it comes to chatas and pesach, shechein yishin b'tzibor, could be yachid. So both of them have this attribute that it's tzibor ki yachid, as opposed to an asham, which is only a carbon which is brought by a yachid. It's not brought, but tzibor. Fine. So if Iboy say Masad Karis Nami Parich, you can actually say really is a good kasha, the Sada Shava. So therefore you can't learn out of Sada Shava to teach Oila. Uben Azai Gamar Gamirula, he just holds it's just considered to be from the P of Ayin Beis. It's interesting. Rashi says Zakanim. Through like a halach Moshe Messinai, that's the din. I bahadi kamer Rabhuna kavachimer. The reason why he said the kavachimer lo amra ella lechaded ba talmidav. He only did it to sharpen up his students, to ask a question, to go back and forth, and that's the whole reason for it. But really, it's just a halacha Moshe Messinai. Okay, maybe we have another question here. Okay, not here. Question TA 23. No. TB 25. Adkan.